Welcome to the Seed Creative Podcast, the podcast where we discuss both video production and just life in general. The goal of this podcast is the same as the goal of our business, to make a difference in people's lives.
Hello! That's the intro. Hello, and welcome to the Seed Creative Podcast. I am your host, Nick Golden. I forced George out. And today we're here with good old Cholas Nicholas Coker and Coco. And we're here to talk about a really exciting project that you just finished. Well, that just was aired, I guess is the word. What was it?
So this was a little cartoon that we made for the Chamber of Commerce of West Alabama, and it's called West Alabama Park. And it is called that because it's a cartoon in the style of South Park. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, that I've never heard of it. No, I'm just kidding. So how about let's talk about how before we watch it, let's talk about how did Jim Page and the chamber approach y'all about doing it, like this being their funny thing, because they always want to do one like really funny thing at their chamber event every year.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Jim Page is the president or CEO or both.
CEO is, I believe, the term.
CEO.
He was on a previous episode of the podcast, which is very interesting.
Oh,
you
cool.
should listen to it.
Check him out. Yeah. He's the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of West Alabama. He's also the main character in this cartoon. And like you said, they had their annual event every year. They have a little funny video. And if you remember in the very first podcast episode in which I appeared, which was also not long after I started working here, we did a little South Park homage in that as well, and that was something George wanted me to do to show off my animation capabilities, and to kind of share with our viewers and our audience that that was something new I was bringing to the table. And so we made that because it was just something fun, and that South Park style is somewhat easy to do. It's easy to draw. I'll get into that later, but we wanted to do that, and when it got time to start thinking about what we wanted to do for the Chamber of Commerce, it was actually George's idea. He was like, what if we did, like a 2 to 3 minute South Park episode? He was like, would that be too much, Coker? I said, hey, I'll do what you tell me to. I don't care if it takes, a month. And so we pitched that idea to them, and they really liked it. And so, that's how it came to be.
So we'll probably talk a little bit about timing, because you said it took a month of regular work days about-ish, right?
It did, and like I said, I wouldn't mind if it took a month, and that's about how long it took. Yeah.
So tell me about how long did the little animation that you did for just the podcast episode, how long did that take? Because that was like 30 seconds or so, I guess.
Yeah, just the podcast episode from beginning to end. So beginning being all the way from, there was no writing or development or anything for that, but for everything from character modeling all the way through the final export of the animation took about a week.
Okay, so that took a week. And so this was much longer. So
it was.
So I mean, obviously it was received very well, I feel like. I mean, I wasn't there, but I think it's awesome. All of us love it. And you showed it to a couple more guys today from, is Uriel? Is that how you pronounce it?
That's
yeah.
it.
Okay. They were here for the last episode, which you should also check out. It was cool. So anyway, I think it turned out awesome. And it's something that I know next to nothing about of how to do it. So if there's anything else you want to say before we just show it. Yeah.
Let's take a look.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be too much longer. We're just trying to finish up this annual meeting script, and you know how antsy we get the week of. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty stressed, but I've even got some South Park on just for some comic relief, but Okay. All right, well, shouldn't be too much longer. Love you too. Bye. Man, how long was I asleep? Tonight's the annual meeting. Donnie! Oh, thank God you're here. How does everything look?
Just fine, Jim. Settle down.
Okay. Okay.
They're just now getting the catering set up. Come see. Jim, here's the brochure for the event. What do you think? I decided this year that I'd do the catering myself.
What?
That's right. Here, have a bowl of Donnie's famous chili.
Ugh. Donnie, we're not serving this. Get on the phone and find a real caterer now.
Well, whatever you say, Jim. I guess Donnie's famous chili is more of a side item anyway. Here, Trip, you can have the rest.
Okay, is Elizabeth ready with the opening speech?
Yep, here she is now.
Hey, Jim, listen. My husband Brian and I discovered the perfect way to deliver my opening speech. I could sing it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, now let your greatest wishes be unfurled.
Yeah, okay, that's great, Elizabeth. Why don't you just go practice over here until we're ready to go on? Okay, there's no way that's going to happen. I'll have to deliver the opening remarks myself. How much longer till we get the doors open?
Don't worry, Jim. Doors open in 5 minutes.
5 minutes? You've got to be kidding me.
Everything's going to be fine, Jim. He's a good man.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you to the Chamber of Commerce of West Alabama's 2022 annual event. To begin, we have a special video presentation. George, start the video. Don't worry, everybody, just some minor technical difficulties. What the?
Food delivery, fajita gumbo.
Oh no, they took out Trip. Everybody calm down. No! This is going to be a disaster. Nah. We got this.
All right, wow, man, that every time is so good. Like I've seen it like 10 times now, and yeah.
Thank you, sir.
How many times do you think you've watched it?
Me?
200.
Oh shoot! I mean, just watching it for gauging it, plenty of times, and then after I finished it, George showed it to about pretty much everyone who came into the office, which was
Yeah.
quite an honor, honestly. But so a lot of times after that too. But yes, I've seen it quite a few times.
So tell me about like what the process is of. So what happened next? So we talked about how they said, okay, let's do this. This is the thing we're doing. So how long? Tell me about like what the writing of it was like, and then developing it, starting to animate it, all that stuff.
Okay. So yeah, like you said, after we got the thumbs up, at that point we had kind of a general idea of what we wanted to happen in it. We knew it was, pretty short form, and we knew that it was going to be a frame story where Jim fell asleep and it was close to time for the event. He just kind of fell asleep while he was stressed. He had this dream in the style of South Park that everything was going wrong. Everything that could go wrong for the event would go wrong. He has this dream, and then at the end he wakes up, realizes, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. But then he sees their award, the Chamber won Chamber of the Year. He sees their award for that, and he goes, nah, we got this.
Yeah.
So that was the basic idea, and that's kind of what we had just going in back all the way back to when we pitched it for him. So once we got the thumbs up, it was just a matter of getting that on paper, getting that fleshed out. So what I did was I collaborated a lot with the people from the chamber and just said, what are things that you think that would be awful if they went wrong? And they sent those things over to me, like saying the brochure, we're always afraid there's going to be a bunch of typos on the brochure. Or Jim said, I'm always afraid the video that is supposed to play, there's just going to be some error and the screen's just going to show an error, stuff like that. And then other just kind of zaniness inspired by crazy dreams you might have, but also from South Park, which is kind of its own fever dream nightmare in a way. So that's stuff like him he's all of a sudden he's naked.
Right.
Stuff
Yeah,
like that.
that's a classic like dream thing.
Yeah. And the theater falling apart, that's taken from South Park itself. So like I said, pulling from a lot of different inspiration sources to create that sort of narrative that happens within the dream.
So tell me about like, did you totally, I just don't even know, like for this kind of thing, did you totally like word for word write the entire script out, and like do you sketch stuff, like do you storyboard stuff out ahead of time, or did you just write like a regular word script, like shooting draft kind of thing, and then animate off of that? Or did you just say, I want these ideas in here, I'll connect them as I animate, like, or what combination?
That's a great question. So for something live action, what I would do is I'd write the script. From there, I may or may not create a storyboard. Sometimes you want to use them, sometimes you don't.
Right.
But I would at least create a shot list, and that's what we have. And then we go into shooting, and those are the two key documents we have. For animation, it's a little different. So I actually wrote out the whole script. Now, that's not always the case with animation. Sometimes, based on what you're doing, you can just create drawings to kind of figure out how things are going to happen.
Right.
Because cinema in general, or the motion picture is kind of the generic term, it's primarily visual. And so you always kind of want to be thinking in terms of visuals. And sometimes those just don't come out great in the written word. And so that's why you want to create those storyboards. So for animation, which is even more visually oriented, you can often use that method to come up with what you want to do. So what I did, though, is I created that script, and from there I made a storyboard. So I kind of just basic drawings of what was going to happen. And then from there I actually created what's called an animatic. And that's kind of what the main guide was for going in. And so an animatic, these are sometimes even used on live action productions, depending on what it is.
And they would call that Previz. Is that like kind of the same thing?
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically what this is it's just kind of the bare bones pose to pose of the animation. So, characters standing like this, and the next minute they're, standing like this. You would have those two key poses in there. and they would still just kind of cut from the one to the other, and then they might move across the frame just with very crude animation, just literally an image sliding across another image, that sort of thing. And what that does is it kind of gets the basic idea of the short across before you create it. And it was actually very helpful for moving into the next phase of having people do their voice acting and everything, because you can essentially show them the short. It's the animation equivalent of sending somebody a sketch before you do the final rendering for them.
Right. Yeah. So at this point, did you go ahead and have all of them come in and voice act? Because I think the other thing that was difficult about this is you're having the actual people come in and voice act, like, where we didn't hire anybody. These were
Right.
just regular people.
These are the actual chamber staff members
that I
doing
thought,
these lines.
for the most part, they actually did really good. Like, I was actually
They
fairly
did.
impressed.
Yeah. So like we said, it's the actual chamber staff members doing their own voices. The script is written around them. There aren't any fictional characters in it. It's all them. And yeah, I agree. They did a great job. Jim, I think, is, George has talked about this. He talked to me about this going into it. Jim's just a good actor, just period. So he's pretty easy to work with. And I think the one who impressed us the most was definitely Elizabeth, because that's actually her singing.
Yeah, that really, it's supposed to be bad singing, but I can tell that she could probably actually
She's
sing.
pretty good.
Yeah.
And she was really, I guess, modest about it when it happened, because it was funny. We were also shooting for the chamber event. We were shooting these interviews, and she had come in and done one, and we had told her, you're going to be doing this interview and you're going to be doing some voiceover. And so she came in and she got done with her interview. They were like, all right, you ready for the voiceover? She's like, yeah, what am I doing? I said, well, we're doing a South Park cartoon. We need you to do your lines for that. She goes,
Right.
oh, she's like, okay, whatever. And so I tell her, I was like, all right, so Jim's having this dream. Everything's going wrong. The idea is that you're the opening speech, and you've come up to him and you've decided, I'm going to sing it. That's how I'm going to deliver it. And so you give this horrible singing. Oh my gosh, she turned red. She was not excited to be doing this thing. She's like, oh, I'm going to embarrass myself. I'm going to be so bad. It wasn't that bad.
No, it really
but-
wasn't.
but
And
it was
it could
certainly
have been
funny.
a lot worse on purpose.
Right.
Yeah. And it was, yeah. And also, I just want to say for the record that this is something I talked about, but I was really happy with the audio quality in the video. I thought it turned out really great. Like, honestly, it sounded realistic, and that's just something like that I'm proud of our studio, which is it took us forever to get that booth to sound anything like that, and it turned out really well. But anyway, so they've come in, they've voice acted. So then
Yes.
at this point,
Well, let me talk a little bit about what that process looks
Okay.
like. I got a little bit into it with Elizabeth, but yeah, at this point I had the animatic created, and something I didn't mention was that in the animatic I pretty much just voice it myself.
right.
I just record all the voices myself just over my computer microphone, and like I said, it gives the general idea so that when they go in to, it's especially helpful for these people who aren't actors. They kind of know how to play certain things just based on what they've seen. So they step into our booth. I'm on the outside in a more dedicated voice acting studio. There'd be, just a window where I could see them, and I'd have a dedicated mic where I could, go straight into their headphones and direct them that way. So basically they just went through the script, recorded each line, and just one by one, one at a time. So Jim would go in and record all of his lines. Donnie would go in and record all of his lines. And basically, anything I wanted revised, wanted them to do again, I might give them a little more direction after that delivery. So just like doing different takes when you're shooting in live action, it's just like that, but all you're shooting is the voice. And the funny part is there's actually, in addition to just the lines themselves, it's kind of funny because you don't think about needing this stuff, but there's also little vocalizations. So people going just...
Yeah.
little noises like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
all throughout, because you never know, you get there and you might just need that.
Yeah, you might just need to grunt a little bit, just a little bit. So how was coaching people through that? Because that's especially like, you tell an actor that, they'd be like, haha, but like they get it. Then they're like, what do you mean you need me to grunt? Like
They were surprisingly down for it. I think they just had the attitude of whatever. They know what they're doing here at Seed Creative. So
yeah.
and they've made good stuff for us in the past. So
There's a
I'll
level-
just trust them.
There's a level of trust. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So yeah. So after that, it just is full on like, all right, now I just got to get in and do the hard part, all the work at this point.
So there's a step we kind of skipped.
Okay.
And that's modeling out and backgrounds. So I actually did this simultaneously while I was doing the storyboard, and even some of while I was writing the script. But basically, you have to know what spaces you're gonna need, what characters you're gonna need, that sort of stuff. And so, in a bigger production where you have more than one person doing the whole thing, this like I said, it might be going on simultaneously, just with a different team is taking care of that while other people are taking care of other things.
Mm-hmm.
So I did all this modeling, all the artwork for the cartoon in Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, and that's vector based software. It's not bitmap. And so just drew it all in there, all the backgrounds, which are all based on real spaces, like Sellers Auditorium and the exterior of the Bryant Conference Center and Jim's office. So I got all those backgrounds made.
Yeah. Do you do that from scratch? Like, do you use a photo as a reference and then hand draw it? Like, how does that work?
For this particular project, I just used a photo for reference and just created it straight in Illustrator. For something else, you might need to sketch it out first, but this I could just hop right into Illustrator.
Oh, okay.
And go in there and create it. And some spaces it's just you're able to keep it a little more vague, like when they're looking at the when they're just kind of walking through the hall at Sellers, it's just kind of basic background sort of stuff.
Right.
And the other thing that it is you have to know is the shot composition. So, whether it's a wide shot, whether it's a close up. Now in South Park style, it's a little easier because there's so little detail. You can just essentially punch in on a wide shot background, and then you've got your other background just right there. So you see that, like for example, when Jim's on stage towards the end, you just punch in to what's there. It's not really a unique background that has to be created. And sometimes the background's as simple as just a solid color. That's one of the ways in which this South Park style is a little bit easier. So I create those backgrounds, and then I create all the characters. And that's relatively easy in the South Park style as well, because they all have the same base model. There's a joke in an episode of South Park where they all join like a cult or something, and they all have to like shave their heads and wear uniforms. And when they're boiled down to that, they all look exactly the same. And like I said, there's a joke where he walks up, he's like, "Hey Kyle, what do you think of this?" He's like, "I'm not Kyle, I'm Butters." It's kind of funny. And that was an interesting challenge in stylizing these characters, because I don't know if you've seen what I call, my style, when it comes to character art, but it's very exaggerated. It's easy to tell characters apart. But like I said, South Park, that's not the case.
Yeah.
And so a big way that they get that across in the cartoon is with the costumes. So, they all wear these very distinctive hats that give them each a unique shape, or they might have a silly haircut, like Butters has the little, tuft of hair on top. And so, like I said, that was an interesting challenge, because like kind of the two central characters of it's Jim and Donnie. And they're both clean-cut white guys. And so we look at them in real life and we can see, they're very different looking. They're very easy to tell apart. But you boil them down to that South Park style where they all have the same shape. They all have the same eyes. They don't have differentiated eye colors. And it becomes a little difficult. So as you can see in the cartoon, I ended up giving Donnie kind of like Stan's hat from South Park.
They need a key feature too.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth was a little easier to differentiate. I could, give her a slimmer form, and she has her kind of distinctive haircut. It becomes really easy when you get a character who's just a different skin color.
Right.
That's just really easy to make them differentiate in that South Park style. It takes care of a lot of the work for you. But yeah, like I said, that character design was an interesting challenge, but I modeled all those out in Illustrator as well. And in each character's sort of model, they have the different features that they might have. So they have their eyes while they're open. They have their eyes when they're closed. Their eyes when they're, sort of doing that, sort of squint thing. They have all the different mouths that they might have. They have different hands. Most of the time they just kind of have that little ball
Right. Yeah.
hand, but sometimes, they stick their hands out like that. So all of that is sort of within the model. That goes from Illustrator to After Effects. And once you're in there, you do what's called rigging. And so that's, you have all these layers that you've created in Illustrator and that After Effects listens to. And this is true in any sort of animation illustration software that work together. And so basically, I set each one up to where all the different pieces work together.
Right.
So when his legs move, the legs of all the characters are pretty much the home base for their entire rig. So anytime their legs move, anytime they rotate, anytime they grow or shrink, the rest of the character is gonna move with that based on its relative position, and then it gets kind of like a tree. From there on out. So you have the legs and then you have the torso. So, when it rotates, the legs don't move, but the arms and the head go along with it. You have the arms, each one is, has that rotation point that's right around the shoulder, that all the hands move with that as well. You have the head is its own thing, and all the eyes and mouth and hair and whatever that moves with the head. So that's all set up in After Effects. It's all rigged so that they all work together, and then I can animate a little more easily and a little more fluidly.
I'm learning so much right now because I don't, like I said, I never use After Effects like pretty much. So, I mean, I use it. I'll grab a template and change colors and text, like super easy, and opacity, like just easy stuff. So, like, I have no clue. So, like, I guess something that we haven't touched on is what got you started. And I think we might have talked about this a little bit in the other episode, but like what got you started in animation, like this kind of stuff? Like what drives your passion for it?
That's a good question. And it's interesting because in my head, and I think this, other animators would agree with this, there's just kind of two worlds. There's character animation, and then there's, I guess, what you'd call graphic animation. Character animation is like South Park. It's like Pixar or Disney, all of that, no matter the medium, whether it's traditionally drawn, whether it's, what we call flash animated, or if it's CG, like what Pixar does, or stop motion, that's character animation. And then graphic animation is stuff like titles and motion graphics.
Which is what I'm more used to. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, those really live as two separate worlds in my mind. I think most animators would agree with me. But the interesting thing is, when I first started getting into film and everything, character animation is what I wanted to do. When I very first, I mentioned in the last episode that, my start was seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then I grabbed my Indiana Jones Legos, and I animated those stop motion. So that was kind of the first little effort I did at, filmmaking and whatever. And so I got to college, I'm starting to pursue it more seriously, and I'm saying, you know what, I think I want to do animation. That's just the medium that interests me. So I got into it, learned about it, learned how it's done, and then I did my first short film, which we've mentioned a couple times, is Drawn to Campus.
Yep.
And it is a hybrid live action and animation. So I did that project. I'm saying, all right, this is going to be kind of my foot in the door. I'm going to start my character animation this way.
Pixar will see this and hire me. Yeah.
Perhaps. And so I finished that project. And it's my first time going through that whole process of what it takes to make a character animation project. I finish it and I say, you know what? I didn't love that project. I don't want to do character animation anymore. And so I just, completely flipped. I was like, I'll stick with live action. I think that's my thing. So in considering live action and working in that field, you're kind of encouraged when you're in school to say, okay, find the thing, the part in the process, whether it's shooting, editing, writing, whatever, find that, focus on it, and get really good at it. And that's how you get your foot in the door in the industry, is doing that thing.
Yep.
And so what I decided on was editing. I was like, I'm a good editor. I really enjoy that. I can edit for hours at a time and not realize that much time has gone by.
Yep.
And so I was like, editing, that's going to be my thing. So I started working on editing, started trying to get work there. And I just kind of realized I was like, I am going to double, triple my opportunities if I learn graphic animation.
Mhm.
So when I was doing character animation, when I was interested in that, graphic animation was the farthest thing from my mind. I
Yeah.
was like, people would ask me, oh, don't you do animation? Well, yes, I do. Well, cool. Could you do some titles for my thing? Oh, well, I don't do that kind of
Don't
animation.
do titles.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden I was reversed. I had made this thing where I was like, just character animation, not for me. I'm kind of past that. It was a phase. And then I'm like, graphic animation, got to learn how to do that. And so I did. I actually didn't start learning it till after I graduated. Started learning After Effects with Udemy and some other online stuff, just, YouTube, good old YouTube. And what I thought was accurate. I ended up really getting work when it came to character animation, and eventually I was hired here. And that's, of course, as we've mentioned, something George, you know he didn't have anybody who was doing that kind of stuff, and
No.
it's part of how I got my foot in the door here. So it became a big part of what I do. So this was the first time when I had that whole saga, I guess you'd say, of character animation to not character animation to graphic animation. I'd gone through that whole process and then returned to character animation. And the interesting part is it's almost as if I've come full circle, because Drawn to Campus is what you call traditionally animated. So, or some might say it tradigitally, kind of a portmanteau word. So it's still frame by frame, drawn by hand. The digital part is just that it's done in a computer rather than on paper. And the South Park thing, on the other hand, is done in the same software. So to create that, we used the software that's dedicated for that. So some artists drew in Photoshop, I drew in Procreate, others would draw in Toon Boom, which is dedicated character animation software. But now I'm creating character animation in the same software in which I would create graphic animation. So it's just interesting that I kind of wound up coming full circle for that.
Yeah. So I guess, where did we leave off in the process of creating this specific one?
Yeah. So at this point, we've gone through the development stage. I've made that animatic. I've modeled all the characters. I've got all the backgrounds I need. I've got all the props I need for it. And I've got all the voice acting. It's been recorded. I'm ready to go. So it's time to animate. So basically, I break down in the same way you would break down a script for a shot list. I do the same thing for animation, but since we're technically not getting shots, I just call it an outline.
Right.
So I say, but I would break it down the same way I would a shot list. So I'd say scene one. Scripts always have scenes, and they're based on location. Scene 1 is Jim's office, and this happens. And then a more complex scene is, scene 6. We have the two shot that's Jim and Donnie walking up to the catering table, and then that's shot 6A. That's that wide shot, and then the close up of the nasty chili, that's 6B. It's broken down just like a shot list. And so I have that, I create that, and I just make it a little checklist.
Right.
Where I can always kind of keep up with what I'm doing. And I actually went a good bit out of order. Just because of what things called for, and to give myself a better workflow, where I wasn't just like, if I ended up having a lot of scenes that were really difficult back to back, I wouldn't just be killing myself.
Right.
So, I could just kind of switch back and forth. And, just like any other filmmaking, it's something you can do out of order. And so that's how I was going there. But I've got the animation. So I've started animating a scene. I go and I grab my character that I need. So because I have the animatic, I know exactly what assets, so to say, of that character that I need. I ended up never really using the characters, they're always sort of in full front view. They're never in profile view. I had that built out in the models. I just never ended up using it. But, if I were to need that, I could grab that. If, I needed, I don't know, certain types of hands, I grab just the things I need. The main difference is if the characters are standing or sitting. That's kind of what was the main determinant there. But I grab everything I need for that character from their model. I plop it into what After Effects calls a composition. It's what Premiere would call a sequence, and what Final Cut would call a project. So I plop them into the composition, the background's in there. And I also had the animatic itself just on top of everything, and I'll kind of toggle it on and off. And so I create the animation in phases. The first phase is just matching the animatic. So just pose to pose, basic, enter and exit, moving around the shot, that sort of thing is phase one. And I'll go ahead and note this as well. I talked about pose to pose. That's one of the principles of animation, and in this project I ended up just doing everything pose to pose. But there's another method that is just called straight ahead. It makes more sense for traditionally animated stuff. It doesn't really make sense for computer animated. But straight ahead animation, pose to pose animation, is where you're going. You say, okay, I have this pose where he's standing, and then he's like this, and then he's like this, and then he's like this, and you draw all the in-betweens between those poses. Straight ahead animation is if I were to say, okay, I've drawn him like this, now I'm just going to draw every frame in between just as I go.
Okay.
I'm not trying to do that. I never ended up doing that for this, just because of the nature of this style of animation.
I got you.
So phase one, like I said, is just purely matching the animatic and kind of seeing what things work or don't work based on what I now have. Sometimes, just like, when you're shooting something and you get to the edit and you're like, we shot it this way, it just doesn't work. I need to try something else in the edit, or we need to reshoot, whatever. Same deal. I might realize I need to do this a little differently. It's not working out. So that's phase one. Phase two is where I sort of flesh out the animation to be a little more detailed, so to say, a little more nuanced. And it's at this point that I'll share with you that the animation style of South Park is surprisingly, notoriously difficult.
Really?
It is. So when I created the little animation for the podcast, I wasn't trying to match that style super closely. I was just doing a little something, and then the visual of the character design just kind of cued the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
But for this, I said, no, I'm going to go full out, make it look like a real episode of South Park. Like I said, it is surprisingly difficult. So South Park, the way it's made is it's designed to look like paper cutout animations. Like little pieces of construction paper have been cut out and they're being photographed and animated in stop motion. But that's not how it's actually created. It's all computer animation. And they're using like the like Mac Daddy of animation software. They use Maya. And they haven't always, but they use it now. Anyway. And so I watched a lot of South Park to sort of get the idea of how I should do things. And what I notice is as the show progresses, things kind of change in the style of animation.
Yeah,
so that was kind
for a
of
show that goes that long, it happens naturally. Yeah.
And so that's where, my first decision kind of came around. If you watch the earlier seasons, you'll notice they very much try to match that paper cutout style. There's not a lot of detail in anything. It's all these basic shapes or really crude cutouts. And the animation, I would say on the whole, is a lot stiffer. So as you go on, you get to like today's stuff, and they really embrace more the computer animation aspect of it. And you see they're using a lot of detailed vector art sometimes. It looks more computer animated. They just seem to embrace that.
Okay.
So what I went for is kind of around season 7 when there was a good kind of happy medium. So where they're still sort of following that paper cutout rule, but when they need to sort of acknowledge the computer animation, take advantage of that, they can. So, like I said, that is notoriously hard to emulate because the computer animation look, I'm trying to think of a cartoon, something that uses that. The only thing I can really think of, just because it feels so definitively computer animated in 2D, is like I think it's a Japanese show. It's called Puka. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It's kind of obscure. They would show it on one of the Disney channels. It wasn't a Disney production, but they would show it on one of the Disney
Yeah,
channels.
if it's not Nickelodeon or Disney, like straight up, I probably don't know. Or DreamWorks, like the big studios that I know of. Yeah,
it's 2D. It's animated in Flash, which is now defunct. But
good riddance.
Honestly, good riddance. But it's not defunct. It's animated in Flash. It has check it out. It's a very computer 2D animated look. It really embraces that. But that sort of animation is it's very clean. The art is very these perfect shapes. And the motion is very smooth And of course, there are those principles of animation at work, like anticipation and follow through and squash and stretch. But they have that digital cleanliness, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So naturally, when you're animating something with a computer, like the South Park thing, your tendency is to just do that, is to make it really smooth. But that's not how South Park is. Like I said, it's kind of looking like stop motion. The thing is if you try to make it look too much like stop motion, it either looks too jittery or it looks too stiff. But you go too far the computer animation direction, it gets too perfect.
And it doesn't match the style.
Exactly.
I understand. Okay.
It was a very difficult line to walk. And the biggest difficulty was in the animated performance. When they're doing stuff like running around, that's sort of fine. But when they're just sort of having conversations with each other, that's the hardest part, because there's so much nuance just in the way they move their heads, or the way they'll move their bodies, or the way that their different body parts work together. Like you'll notice in West Alabama Park, there's a lot of moments where the characters, they sort of lean or something, and you'll see the rest of all their body parts will kind of flow with that. There's anticipation and follow through, and just finding the right level of those things was, like I said, notoriously difficult.
Yeah, I definitely picked up on that. That was something that I noticed that I was like, wow, that's the kind of stuff that I do notice, even though I don't do this kind of thing. Specifically, what's the lady's name that sings again? I forgot. Elizabeth. Okay. When her character is singing, I noticed her arms like go up and then her hands like shake a little bit. And like, I don't know if this is easy, like making her hands shake is the easy part, but like what impressed me about it was like the in-between motions that I noticed what you're talking about. So I wouldn't have been able to articulate it, but yeah. So I totally get, that makes total sense to me. See, I'm learning, and so are y'all.
Learning. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's we're running up on our time here a little bit, so let's skip ahead just a little bit. So how does all of this end up like wrapping up? Like what's the final phases of this?
So like I said, I've gotten through phase 2, which is that more nuanced animation. Phase 3 is almost purely the lip sync. Which is in South Park style is pretty easy, because it's just a matter of switching out the mouths at the right moments. Other animation, it might be a little more difficult, but this one is pretty easy. Phase 3 is just adding that in. And then the next phases after that, I might have a phase 4 where I just add more nuance that I think I might need, just based on where I am. But then after that, after I think the animation itself is good, that's actually where I hold off. I kind of pause, but there's going to be one more phase. So I've got all those animated scenes and shots done. I sequence them all together in their own composition. And that's the point where we send it to the client for their approval. And once we get the thumbs up from them, this looks good, change X, Y, and Z, which there really wasn't much of for this. I think
they're pretty chill.
Yeah, they're pretty chill. And this was very much a project where they were just like, y'all just go. Yeah. So after that, the final phase is getting that look, getting that rendered look. So on something, that's not South Park style, like the Mammut video, for example, that I did, everything has, sort of these shadows so that they don't look just like flat vector layers on top of each other.
Right.
But they're these shadows and they're very grainy. So it's adding that look. Once you add, sort of a look like that, the animation becomes very hard to change if you need to. So that's why we send it to them first
and get it approved
before we do that. Yes. So in the case of this South Park thing, it's a matter of just making things look like they're actually cardboard cutouts. So it's adding certain texture onto certain things. And in this world, it's just a matter of, are things dark? The darker they are, the more texture they need. And then things like the drop shadows. So you'll notice all their eyes, there's a little shadow just above their eyes, as if there's a light that's casting that shadow. And then they all have shadows based on what's behind them. So it's as if you have a bunch of pieces of paper stacked on top of each other. You got to ask, what would that look like? And so luckily for me, since this is going directly after South Park, all I have to do is look at that and say, what do they do? And just emulate that.
Yeah, so you don't have to come up with it.
Yeah.
Well, you had to figure out how to emulate it, but you didn't have to invent it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
after that, you get them all sequenced out, which like I said, I had already done. George shot and directed the live action sequences that you see, the little framing devices, and they're very excellent. But it's just getting that all sequenced out, and then it's ready to go. You got a finished project.
And well, you had to sound design. Was that the final step?
Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Yeah, sound design. That's kind of the interesting part is, in animation, it's not like shooting something live action. You don't have any sound that's actually there. So you have to create that all from scratch. And that's exactly what I did. And luckily I had, a good, prelude to this good practice run because I made a little film just on my own called The First Man. It's a little caveman story. And it has no dialogue. And because of that, I said, and because we're shooting just in a public park, I was like, I'm going to create all the sound in post. And so that was my first big challenge doing that. So having completed that, felt very capable. And so for this South Park thing, it was just another matter of that, finding sounds that fit,
Yeah, so was this all like basically stock? Like the sound out of all of it that actually stands out to me, that every time I'm like, wow, that sounds so good, is and this might just be you found one that said car drives right to left, is when he drives his car in and crashes it at the very beginning when he's going there. Like it's so like 3D sounding. Did you just like find that, or did you have to like pan it from right to left?
Good question. Yeah, that's actually the first sound design I did, was that scene right there. And yeah, that was actually just a case of panning. What you're hearing there is you're hearing just it's a bunch of sounds layered on top of each other. You're hearing a car engine revving up, so that sounds like he's speeding up. You have that. You have the screeching of the tires, so that's happening. And then you have the crash itself, and then the car turning off. Those are all kind of layered
and the fire
to create all of that one motion where the car slams into the thing.
Yeah, I think that's the best one personally.
Well,
That or a similar thing when the like food truck crashes in. It's kind of a similar thing, but different though, in a different way. So,
and for those who know, there's a Wilhelm scream in there. It's my first time using a Wilhelm scream. Baby's first Wilhelm scream.
There you go.
See if you can find it.
You gotta watch it again. Go back. It's at minute 5. I don't know. That was the best guess. So we're running up on our time here, but I think I will just say overall, but like I said, it's awesome. I think my favorite part overall is when George is asleep in the top, because it just cracks me up. And
I like that too.
I also love the little seed coffee cup that's in Jim Page's office.
You just like the seed references.
Yeah. Basically, seed's the best. But I feel like you've added something to our arsenal that we previously didn't have. I think the most animation that we had ever done was in this documentary that we did with it was mostly in motion, but it was for the state of Alabama, and I think it actually won an Emmy, I believe. So got it in. We forgot the last couple episodes. Don't call us out for it.
That was
okay.
about as smooth as a stick of butter.
Yeah. So not at all. This is about as smooth as Jim Page parked his car anyway. So I think, and there's anything else you want to say? If not, I'm ready to wrap up.
I'll just say that it was a great experience getting to do that. I'm so glad that the chamber was down for it, and that George had the idea and was down to just let me take a month and do that as a part of my work here. It just ended up being a great process. The whole time I was like, something's gonna go wrong. It's just in the stars. Something's going to go wrong. It always does. It never really did. It's everything went smoothly in that pre-production phase. I was like, okay, it's going to go south with the voice acting. They're going to be terrible at voice acting, and it's not going to be usable.
Yeah.
But then they did a great job, and they didn't really have any revisions. They really liked it. So, it was just really God blessed it sort of thing. And it just ended up going really smoothly, and that was just a real blessing.
Yeah. Well, like I said several times, I think it turned out great. So
thanks, man.
Thank you for teaching me something about anime. I feel like I understand more.
I'm glad you learned something, my son.
Now I'll forget it all. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Well, with that said, thank you for watching the City Creative Podcast. Be sure to come and specifically watch this one. If you haven't, go back, because I'm going to show some of the clips as we go. And, check out the rest of ours. Subscribe, like, comment. Tell us stuff that you want to hear us talk about. We're doing this for you. So, if you want us to talk about dogs, we'll do an entire episode about dogs. Could happen.
Yeah.
Turn on your notifications, all that good stuff. And we'll see you next time, next Monday. Peace.
This podcast was produced by Nick Golden with executive producer George Edmondson, edited by Nick Golden and Gavin Manning. Be sure to subscribe, drop a like and a comment. Tune in every Monday for brand new podcast content, and we'll see you on the next one.